Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Matt.
I'm very excited to do this week's episode because Scrubs is my favorite show of all time.
Yeah, this is your show. Like, what I cannot think of this show and not have you pop into my brain. It's really unfortunate because, like, all I'm seeing, not that I don't love you, but like all I see while I watch this show is like moments happen and go, that got Matt. Like that made Matt laugh. Like this, everything that was happening, I would just stop and I would go, that's Matt. This is his jam.
Do you know how I got into this show?
No, how did you get into this show?
So I was working at a retirement home in the kitchen.
Okay.
And I guess only like 3 seasons had aired at that point. And I had gotten moved from, technically it was an upgrade. It was great. There was like the main kitchen and like the entire cafe area where like all of the residents would meet for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But then there was cafe, which was like made to order stuff instead. Like It wasn't just like, hey, you have these 3 things. So like working cafe was interesting because you'd only have to work maybe like a 45-minute to an hour burst, right? Like the doors would open, you'd get a rush of people coming in to grab like sandwiches or chips or whatever, and then you'd close up and clean up for the next like big batch of people. So it was basically just you and one other guy who was my boss. And he was like, you remind me so much of Zach Braff from the show Scrubs. Like everything about you. And I was like, I don't know what that is. So
when was this? Like what's the timeline here?
Like 2005, maybe.
Okay, so this was like the show was airing.
Yeah, it had just started airing. So I had Netflix, the disc version, and I had them send me the first season in the mail. And I got the first disc. I got the first disc of Scrubs in the mail, watched it that day, loved it so much I jumped in my car, drove to Suncoast Pictures, and bought all of the available seasons, binged it, and then became like a weekly watcher from that point on. And like this was my show. Like I had a giant watch party for what was supposed to be the series finale.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you know about that drama, but that's really annoying.
I don't.
So Zach Braff and the creator Bill Lawrence had intended to wrap up the show on season 7.
Yeah, I knew Zach eventually ended up leaving.
Yeah, so they were going to wrap up the show in season 7, and then the writer's strike happened, and that season got cut in half, so they only got to air like 10 episodes. And then NBC canceled the show. Then ABC picked up the show for one more season so that they could do their final season. So they literally, the last episode of season 8 is called My Finale. And it was a hit on ABC, and ABC wanted to do more. And Bill Lawrence was like, well, we could do a spinoff series. And they shot this whole spinoff series called Scrubs Interns. And then at the 0 hour, ABC was like, we're just going to call it Scrubs Season 9. And they just released this season that was a spinoff series that maybe has like 3 cameos from the main cast in the entire season as the final season of Scrubs. So I've never watched it. In my heart, it ended at season 8, and that was the end.
Oh my God, dude. I feel like we need to. I feel like you and I need which I will do. Like this is a thing. As we were watching last night, I looked at Teddy. So we're in the middle of a Modern Family binge.
Yeah.
And we're in the beginning of season 6. And what I love about Modern Family, have you watched Modern Family through?
I've never watched it through. I've seen like episodes here and there, and it was always it was one of those shows that was always on right before Raw. So I would watch like an episode before Monday Night Raw.
Yep. So what I love about Modern Family is like it is one of those shows where you could be laughing your ass off one moment and then just bawling the next. Like it's got that perfect balance. And even like the sadness isn't like it's sad. It's just so sweet and touching.
Dude, I was crying like a motherfucker this episode. Like I was like hyperventilating crying during this episode. So we had already done the first Christmas episode in season 1.
And I think I told my story on Scrubs.
Yeah.
The only thing, like I've watched the first season through. I watched the first season the summer before I started teaching. what had happened was I literally just sat down one day. I was like, I'm gonna try Scrubs, and I watched that first episode, and I feel like I never connected with a character more on their feelings
on their
than
first
JD
day at a
did
job. Yeah,
on his first day at a job, and I think we had that conversation.
Yeah,
and it's absolutely wild how that translates.
It's a beautiful show in that way. Now,
Yeah.
I forgot about this episode. I remembered elements that there was another Christmas episode. Like, I knew
Okay.
that there was another Christmas episode. You're big on rewatching old Christmas episodes of shows in
I
December.
get more into watching Christmas episodes of shows than I do Christmas movies, and I think it's
and I'm the
because-
opposite. I like when it's December, I want to watch the movies and I watch the specials. But my girlfriend is like you; she likes the Christmas
Yeah.
episodes. So the one day we were like, "Let's watch all the Scrubs Christmas episodes."
Mm-hmm.
And literally, as soon as I watched this, I said, "I have to write this one down because Dylan's gonna love this episode
Yeah,
so much."
This was amazing. This was awesome. This was awesome. Like the message was amazing. I love the speech that Perry gives JD.
Oh, we're gonna go. I have so many notes in
just
order
to not
of
make
operation.
promises.
Yeah.
Teddy brought literally Teddy's first thing she says. She goes, "They did a Grey's Anatomy like this once.
Yeah.
Don't make promises." Like, and
There's-
she like started quoting
so
it. I was
there's-
like, "Oh shit!"
There's a line in they start taking shots at Grey's Anatomy in the
Do they?
later
I don't
seasons.
doubt it.
There's like one part where they're like, "Oh, we got to get home and watch Grey's Anatomy," and like JD goes, "I love that show. It's almost like they watch our lives and write about it."
Jesus.
They also did an episode making fun of House. They really started taking shots at like all of the because they were one of the first. They were the
Yeah.
first ones to mix comedy. Like there was ER, and I think this and
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy came out at the same time, but it was like very different. Like
This episode in particular, again, I don't know what the running timeline is, felt very House.
yes,
Of like, what's going on with this guy? Like,
Yeah.
we need to figure out what the fuck's wrong with this
So-
person specifically.
So the thing with Scrubs, and you can look this up, I think I said this on the first episode we did.
Yeah.
It is still to this day considered the most medically accurate television show of all time.
Really?
And part of that is because Bill Lawrence based it on his roommate, John Dorian, who was a medical student, but his roommate in college. So John Dorian is, if you look in the credits, you'll see that there's a John Dorian as a consulting person. And every
That's awesome.
season, they would sit down with a bunch of doctors and interview them about their craziest case and how it was solved.
yeah.
And then they would take those. So almost every single episode is inspired by a real medical case that a doctor dealt with and how they came to that conclusion. And then they
That's
just
cool.
pepper in the jokes along the way. But very rarely, like they have doctors on site who will tell them like, no, we would never do it like that. You can't, you have to
Yeah.
change. Like they try to keep it as close to like what would happen in a real hospital.
It's so funny because I feel like from an outsider's perspective, if you were to see like clips of this show,
You wouldn't think that at
you
all.
wouldn't think that. You think this is gonna be the goofy hospital comedy,
Yeah.
and just that.
But I think the other big element, and like I never worked as a doctor, obviously, but I did work in a hospital, like delivering food to patients and stuff.
Yeah,
And something that
I
Scrubs,
can see that. I
Yeah.
don't know why I can see that, but I can definitely see that.
yeah, something that Scrubs gets very, very right is the humor that happens in a hospital because you're dealing with people dying all the
Dying
time,
all
and
the
if you
time,
don't find ways to make jokes about it, like you're going to not make it. So let's dive into this. So it starts
Yes,
off.
let's go.
This episode starts off. Turk is complaining because they've added this new surgery room where families can watch the
What an
surgeons.
insane concept.
Yeah. Watch the surgery being presented, and he's pointing out all the different families that have to watch him do surgery, and he points to this African American family.
I looked at Teddy when this happened, and I'm like, what the fuck is Matt having me watch?
Yeah.
And like they bring it back because Turk kind of calls it out.
Well,
And
that's
think
what I
that-
mean. He goes with
Yeah.
that, and he goes, "Did you go with the black family screaming at its TV screen stereotype?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Like a bear to honey."
Yeah.
But JD, however, is supposed to talk to a bunch of college students, and there's this hilarious bit where it cuts to him, and it sounds like he's talking about a medical procedure until halfway when you realize he's explaining how he styles his hair. And then he throws a tube of styling gel, and he goes, "Great question, Rudy. And he goes, "Oh, Rudy, you have a second question." And in that time frame, Rudy goes from having this
fixes
mop of
hair.
hair to like a beautifully coiffed hair. And that's where he asks the focal point of the whole episode of what was your greatest moment in medicine.
In medicine, yeah.
And I wrote down everybody's greatest moments because throughout the episode, we're seeing all of these characters' greatest moments. JD's greatest moment is having sex with a grandmother after
After
her daughter gives
another
birth.
doctor delivered. Yeah, I loved the line where he's like, "Yeah, he delivered the baby, but I had sex with grandma."
He goes, "I rang in New Year with
I
grandma."
rang a New Year with grandma. That shit is so fucking funny. Any more questions?
Yeah, the Todd has an insane story about reviving a dead body through a high five.
Yeah, and it turns out he just broke the guy's
He
hand.
just broke the guy's hand. I'm scrolling through. Sorry. Elliot's best moment is when she worked on a person who had a pony, had ponies,
Yep,
and let her
she
ride
got
a
a
pony.
Carla was a
Doctor actually
somebody
thanking
listened
her.
to her.
Yeah, said thank you for advice. Dr. Kelso's is not helping somebody because he's too busy drinking with two girls at a bar.
Yep.
And then Dr. Cox's best moment is giving two Heimlich maneuvers to two different people and shooting a piece of gum into the trash can. Perfectly.
Can, yeah.
So all kind of underwhelming.
Which I would still argue, like,
Impressive
I think Dr.
moments.
Cox's is the one that is the closest to a normal one. Because, yes, he is shooting the gum into the basket, but he also did save 2 lives.
He saved 2 lives in a row.
Yeah, so.
One of my favorite lines in the entire episode is Turk makes a comment about how he loves the older ladies. And Carla's like,
oh my God.
Carla's like, well, see, now we have a problem because either you're referring to me as old or there's another woman in your life. And there's this long silence and he just goes, your favorite jeans are too tight and they look ridiculous on you. And she goes, what? And he goes, I'm already in trouble and it has to be said.
I think that was the moment where Teddy was like, I remember watching this and Carla being my favorite.
Oh, Carla's so
Carla's
good.
amazing.
What's up, everybody? This is Brian here to tell you about our podcast, Bingetown TV. Our hosts include 7 best friends with a love for all things television. We cover a range of genres with a focus on fantasy and sci-fi, but also dip our feet into drama, horror, comedy, and pretty much anything we think is good television. We use the traditional deep dive formula for new live shows that are released week to week, but our calling card is our Rooks and Vets and Pitchtown TV series. Rooks and Vets pairs 2 of our hosts that have seen a show with 2 of our hosts that have not seen a show. Pitchtown TV is when we have a special guest pitch us a show by having us watch the pilot and trying to convince us to watch the rest. If you're craving more content on some of your favorite TV shows, then you should listen to Bingetown TV. Find us on our website at bingetowntv.com, the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, or wherever else you may find your podcast.
We meet our main patient this episode. A guy comes in.
Yeah.
JD has the voiceover where he's like, it's always sad to see someone come in during Christmas. I think I'll tell Elliot that. And then he looks over at Elliot and goes, it's always sad to see someone come in at Christmas. And he goes, she goes, yeah, it's the saddest thing. And then the little boy Taylor's behind them. And she goes, except for that. And then his ice cream just flops off of his gun.
Which I prefer the follow-up bit when he comes back, when JD
walks
comes in with an ice cream cone. And is it Carla that goes, oh, you got him another ice cream cone. And he's like, yeah,
sure. That's a waffle
cone.
Well, then he explains to the dad. He goes, we're thinking you might have mono. And he goes, isn't that from kissing? And he goes, you could get it other ways. And it cuts to a flashback and he's just sitting at a party. And someone turns around and sneezes right on him.
Everyone is making out around him. And one of the people making out just turns around and sneezes on him.
There's also a funny runner throughout this entire episode of a creepy old lady in the hospital named Mrs. Cross.
Yeah.
And JD is just has her teeth on a
Dentures.
chain around his neck as revenge for her hitting him. But this is the speech you were talking about. JD promises the patient, like, hey, this seems like no big deal. We'll get you home for Christmas. And immediately Dr. Cox pulls him out. And the line that I wrote down is he goes, unfortunately, your patient is just young enough to die. And because it's the holidays and there's a kid involved, can't you just feel it in the air? And it's like they tackled that in the first Christmas episode we watched, where Turk completely loses his faith because so much bad shit happens during the holidays.
Yeah. I feel like the in my opinion, again, and this is not somebody who has seen this entire show, the relationship between JD and Dr. Cox is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in all of television.
It is a beautiful focal point, runner, whatever you want to call it. And it follows through 8 seasons. They
John
really keep it going.
McGinley straddles that line of being such a dick, but also such a loving father figure.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole show, or what I've seen so far.
Well, and I love that Carla
love
always calls him out on it. There's that scene where she says, he's a good doctor. You just don't want him to not depend on you.
Exactly.
So we also get this plot with Elliot. Elliot's asked to take care of the kid
this is so funny.
Because the guy is crashing and they don't know what's happening and they can't figure it out. And Elliot is afraid of kids. So she's trying to help him out. And the first line I wrote down that she says is, "Do you want to see someone that's even worse off than your dad? We call him the head in the bed." But then she gives him money to go and, well, first she's giving him a tour of the hospital, and the kid's talking about being scared. Oh no, she does lose him first. She gives him money to get candy, and he just
money to get chocolate milk in a vending machine.
Chocolate milk in a vending machine. He just disappears. Yeah. And then they find him, and the first part where I truly start crying is this little kid Taylor finds his way into Dr. Kelso's office, and the conversation he has with Kelso, because Kelso earlier, Turk goes to him to ask if he can just make one exception. And he goes,
because we find out that we haven't mentioned that the guy does not have insurance.
He doesn't have insurance.
Yeah.
And Kelso says, I could do that if you fill out a 3T form. And he goes, what's a 3T form? He goes, tough titties Turkleton. And he kicks Turk out. Now this little kid shows up and he has this conversation about baseball. And he says something where he's like, maybe I can come and play catch with you sometime. And Dr. Kelso's just like, I would really like that. And then Elliot finds him and walks him away and mentions who his dad is. And Kelso picks up the phone and pulls the strings to make it so that the dad can stay.
So is there a strain, or do we ever meet Kelso's son?
No.
Is there a strain in that relationship?
No, the joke with Kelso's son is we never meet him. And through the stories, we find out that his son is a very talented, very famous gay Broadway star. Whose big hit was writing a show called My Dad the Doctor.
My God.
But he's like, it was not a very kind show. And but you find out that he loves him. He loves him. He loves his son's husband. There's never
I for some reason really latched on to when they were talking about baseball, and he's like, well, my son sews the uniforms, and the kid just so innocently goes that's really cool. And he's like, no, it's not. And I'd hurt because I'm like, no, that's fucking cool. That would be so awesome. To know the person that sews the uniforms of the teams. That's really neat.
He's Kelso's one of my favorite characters because throughout the series you see more and more of why he is the way that he is.
Yeah.
And then there's a plot point in a later season where he hits the age where he has to retire, and he just becomes he can't leave the hospital. It's his home. So he's not an employee anymore, but he's just hanging around in Hawaiian shirts, drinking beers and just reminiscing. Yeah. And he just becomes the wacky sidekick. The transition of him just becoming this funny old man. is so good.
Yeah.
There's a very quick subplot. They don't do much with the janitor in this episode, but
No.
JD convinces Turk to talk to Dr. Kelso by promising him a very special type of gum, which ends up being the denture gum for Mrs. Cross. And Turk puts it in his mouth.
You really got to sell it with the eyes.
Sell it with the eyes. Turk puts it in his mouth and immediately spits it on the ground, which the janitor finds. And then he's talking to Carla, and he's like, whenever anyone disrespects me, I make sure to write them a note. And then it cuts to him chewing gum, and he has put pieces of gum across Turk's entire windshield that says gum goes in the trash.
And then he backs up and like grabs at his jaw, like to show that he has been the one chewing like he's not just pulling gum off of shit. Like he has been chewing every piece of fucking gum that makes it on this window. To which, dude, nothing is worth the jaw pain that comes from eating too much gum.
Not at all.
That shit sucks.
So Carla is talking to JD and Dr. Cox because they cannot for the life of them figure out what is happening with this guy.
Yeah.
And she mentions that he was goofing around with his kid when he started to feel pain. And Dr. Cox says, ooh, we haven't checked him for goof-around-itis. So which JD goes, we should also check him for a case of the silly willies. And then they walk away.
Again, proving that they're kind of just two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
They're so awesome.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to mention Turk's best moment is being the fast at doing an appendectomy against Dr. Beardface. To which he goes, it's Beard Fasse.
Which that stupid fucking humor gets me every time.
So here's
that and 30 Rock's Dr. Spaceman instead of Dr. Spaceman. So that shit gets me.
So you'll catch these when you watch the show. But there's characters like Dr. Mickhead, Colonel Doctor, Snoop Intern, and the story behind them is literally that they were just extras in the background. And in the editing room, they started making up nicknames for these like 5 or 6 extras. And then they're like, we should give them lines. And then they just gave them lines, but kept them with the names that they had made up watching them in the editing room during season 1.
Love it.
There's a line that I love when Cox is giving JD shit and he goes, kites always fly highest against the wind. And he's like, what are you talking about? He goes, me, I'm a kite. I'm a beautiful kite. But then, I start crying uncontrollably throughout this point because they figured out what it is. Carla points out, like, he might have a ruptured spleen because the son kicked him when they were wrestling.
Fucking wild, dude. Like
dude, have you ever gotten kicked by a little kid, though? Dude, it hurts. Kids like have no control of how strong.
Like, bro, we're
playing.
playing.
Yeah, I've had my friends' kids beat the absolute
kicking
shit out of me by mistake. But they're rushing him to surgery. Turk's like, oh no, not the surgery room with the window. And JD goes, well, it's fine. Mr. Milligan only has one son, and Elliot lost him. And Turk goes, awesome. But then Elliot finds the kid, and she's like, you shouldn't run away. And he says that he's scared. And she goes, well, everyone's scared here. She's like, this is where I used to hide. And she opens the door. There's just a guy.
There's a guy crying.
There. She goes, I wrote down all 3 lines that she has. She goes, hang in there, Steve. He's like, they teach you so much in medical school, but they don't teach you how to deal with it. And then she slams the door and goes, Steve will be stronger if he gets through this on his own. And then he's crying as they walk away, and she just yells, get it together, Steve. They show up, and
it's the don't miss, because I think this is when I started tearing up, is when Elliot just goes, well, I just learned that the people around here need me to be brave.
Yes,
because
and your dad needs you to be brave.
Yeah, how are you? When did you stop being scared? And I think it's a moment of, I almost expected her to say, I didn't.
Yeah.
We just live in fear, but we know that we have to be brave around here because other people can't be. So, and then like he says he wants to watch the surgery, to which I was like, no fucking way.
Well, first he says, can I hold his hand? And she goes, shockingly, they're really against that.
Yeah, they frown upon that.
Well, then there is one more joke, because this is where Carla's yelling at Dr. Cox, saying like, you know that JD knows what he's doing. You need to give him a little bit of a leash. And he goes, have you ever seen a drunk baby?
Yeah.
He goes, at first it's endearing, but man, you take your eyes off them for 1 minute and they've got a bucket on their heads ramming into your brand new TV. Thing was barely out of the box. Anyway, what I'm saying is Newbie's my drunk baby.
Yeah. I feel like it only happened once.
Yeah.
Like, we don't...
Elliot goes over because Turk does not want the little boy watching the surgery.
Yeah.
And she basically says, like, can you speak French? And he's like, I learned a little bit to pick up girls on my class trip to France. And she says, like, hey, I think it would really mean a lot to him if you, in French, she says, like, I think it would mean a lot if you just let him watch. And he responds with, I have an Eiffel Tower in my pants. And then yells grapefruit. But then there's this voiceover from JD, and he's saying, like, the hardest part about this place is now it's all up in the air. We just have to wait and see what happens. And then I absolutely love this. They burst through the doors. It's this Beatles-inspired cover of Joy to the World that's actually written and performed by cast members of the show.
Nice.
I'm sure you remember him from season 1, but Ted, the lawyer.
Yes.
Unfortunately, no longer with us. Absolute brilliant comedian. But he was in a Beatles parody band called The Buttles that just did an all Beatles-inspired Christmas album.
Yeah.
So it's them covering Christmas songs in the style of early Beatles, and he's singing as Paul.
What a niche fucking thing.
It's
Isn't
so
it
fun.
Fucking weird
Yeah.
that, like, people, like, these things exist?
Yeah.
Like, where I'll just sit there and I'll be like, I wonder if there's, like, a horror punk band that only does songs about Captain Spaulding. And, like, I type that in, and that shit exists.
Yeah.
Like, it's so fucking weird.
Dylan, how can that be
people's brains
shocking
work.
when you know me and how many random-ass
That's what I'm
podcasts
saying.
I do? I'm just like,
it's just so odd that we have these,
But that's
these
why
little pockets.
That's
why
people,
we exist.
Yeah, I literally
Like-
tell people, if you want it to exist, someone else probably does too. So you might as well
Exactly.
do it. You might only have one diehard fan, but it works.
I think that was when we came up with the idea of the podcast. You're like, yeah, I'm thinking of a Christmas podcast. And my response was, okay, but just a heads up, here's a bunch of them.
Yeah,
and you were
here's-
like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I think there was like more Christmas podcasts. These exist. And it's like, yeah, man, people fucking love this shit. When people love something, they really love something. That's awesome. Good for him. Rest in peace, unfortunately. I do remember when he had passed.
And then I wrote down the full speech at the end is, it cuts to JD and he's talking to another college class. And again, he gets asked, what was the best moment in medicine? And it's beautifully done because it's cutting between every single cast member as they're filling it in. So all of them have replaced their best moment with this. And the speech ends up going, there was this guy and he had the most amazing little kid, and the doctors actually listened to me, and I knocked the surgery out of the park, and I pulled some strings to help the guy, and honest to God, I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it, but Newbie handled everything perfectly, and I got to keep my promise because they got to go home for Christmas.
It's fucking awesome.
Oh my God. I got chills
amazing.
just reading it. I'm like, it's so good.
really
and that's
good.
like Scrubs at its, to me, this is everything that represents why I love this show.
Yeah.
Like my love of
this
Scrubs.
is a fantastic episode of this show.
Yeah.
Are
Like,
you ready for my butt?
all right, let's hear your butt. I love your butt.
But it's not a Christmas episode. I understand it's a promise. I get it, but this is not something that I would rewatch the first one.
Season
honestly.
1 is more Christmassy. I think this is the better of the two episodes. I agree
Yes.
it's not as Christmassy, but that's also why we're
100%.
watching it in March.
Exactly. But like I don't want it to be like
I would never
don't want
pick this for like a November, December episode.
I don't want this to end with like Dylan didn't like the episode. It's just Dylan loved the episode.
Yeah.
I think this is a great episode of television. I can't wait to watch the series. Dylan's not watching this around Christmas time.
Yeah.
Like that's my only caveat.
Well, and I
just wanted to mention that.
that's fair, and I will say that this is also, I think there are one or two other Christmas episodes. This is the last one we're talking about because this is the closest it's ever got. Like, there's one where literally when we were looking at the list and watching Christmas episodes, there are ones where it's like, oh, this was the Christmas episode, and then the closest thing to Christmas is that there's some like garland on the table in the background. Like
That's
it's never
so
even
unfortunate.
addressed what time of the year it is. At least this one, like there is this central thing starting and ending with like, it's really sad when people come to the hospital at Christmas time. And like Dr. Cox putting on the Santa hat and saying, I really do hate Christmas. And like, there's like elements peppered throughout of like reminding you that it's at least a December Christmas time.
You know what's
episode.
been like a highlight on that recently has been when the streaming services will do the special like Christmas collections of TV episodes. So like I'll be there was one day closer to the holiday season when I was scrolling through Peacock and there was like a section for The Office and a section for Modern Family and a section for, and I believe there was a section like for this as well. And I'm like, there's like certain shows that their Christmas episodes are so synonymous with Christmas. And there's also shows that do what you were just pointing out. And I feel like these streaming services are like, no, dude, we need them all up there. Like, oh, hey, they mentioned Santa in this episode. That needs to go in the Christmas collection. But I absolutely love the first episode as part of Christmas. I love this episode as a genuine episode of Scrubs and a great episode of TV. It did make me cry and it made me laugh.
It's my one complaint though. I'm going to throw one complaint about what you were just talking about. And I don't know if this is the case on Peacock. Disney Plus did me dirty with this.
Okay. I watched this on Hulu.
Okay. That's a good way to do it.
Which I think is the same now.
Yeah, like, Hulu and Disney are one and the same. I was going to say Disney does me dirty during Halloween and Christmas because they'll have like the Simpsons Halloween collection. And then you click into that first Treehouse of Horrors, but then the next episode isn't the second episode of Treehouse of Horrors.
Yep.
It just goes to the next. I'm like,
to the next season.
I don't want to sit here and keep having to flip back. Like Disney Plus, you got to figure that shit out because otherwise that would be what I put on at a Halloween party. I just want to put something on that'll like loop the shit and not just play random episodes of The Simpsons. I can watch random episodes of The Simpsons whenever the hell I want, which we will be talking about The Simpsons later on this year because Man is one of my favorite Simpsons episodes, a Christmas one. So
hell yeah,
stay tuned for that. But Dylan,
fuck yeah.
Dylan, you bring joy to my world.
Dude, you bring joy to my world. My favorite moment in medicine is me sitting here sipping this coffee medicine, talking to you, buddy.
Aww,
love you.
Love it.
Whoa, 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 now we won't stop till the big ball drops on New Year's. Have a happy holly, have a great, great, great holly, have a merry, 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 happy holiday.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.